Let's flash back to December 19th, 1995 here. Remember when the Calgary Flames traded away Joe Nieuwendyk? Yes? No? Well, it actually turned out to be one of the best trades that the Calgary Flames made at maximizing an asset that we weren't able to afford to keep and was holding out here. It's kind of similar to, although I'm comparing it to most recently, where Taylor Hall was traded away from the New Jersey Devils to ultimately get traded to the Arizona Coyotes here, but it was a totally different reason here, but it was about a team maximizing an asset here, and the Calgary Flames were forced to and were able to do that back in 1995, as they definitely showed a sign of the complete dismantling of the 1989 Stanley Cup team, as Joe Nieuwendyk was one of the players, a part of that team, but ultimately ushered in a new era, and we brought in a great player in the result of that trade. As if you go back to the 1995-96 season here, Joe Nieuwendyk, actually after when he was drafted 27th overall, and that was in the second round in 1985, Joe Nieuwendyk, he made his debut in the NHL. I mean, his first full season was the 1987-88 season there, and he actually won the Calder Trophy there. And actually his first two seasons in the NHL with the Calgary Flames, he scored over 50 goals. And he did not do that again throughout the rest of his career. And apparently he was up there with a guy named Mike Bossy and that Wayne Gretzky guy as one of the few players in NHL history to score 50 goals in their first two seasons in the NHL there. So the Flames definitely had someone special that they drafted back in 1985 here. And he was a part of the team that won the Stanley Cup in 1989. And after when we finally got over the hump and won the Stanley Cup in 1989 there, we definitely did not able to get back there, as we definitely struggled in the playoffs in the first round there. And then also what happened in the early to mid-90s, which led to the situation why the Calgary Flames had to ultimately trade away Joe Nieuwendyk, because salaries were going up, and there was no salary cap at the time, and spending was starting to go out of control here. As you know, at that time there, I still look back at the lockout that wiped out the 2004-2005 season there. I felt that was necessary to save the NHL, to give small market teams like the Calgary Flames a chance where, you know, we could draft, player, develop them, and keep them, and have, potentially play their whole career with the franchise that, drafted them in the first place. And, it was definitely tough to say goodbye to Joe Nieuwendyk, because at the start of the 1995-96 season there, and that was after when Calgary traded away, we started off, I think the dismantling of the team definitely started off. I mean, Lane was going to retire. Huck and Luba decided he wanted to go back home to Sweden, but when we traded guys like Doug Gilmour, and that didn't turn out well. I mean, after 1994, where I felt that was the last good kick at the can there, where we still had Theron Fleury and Joe Nieuwendyk, and at the time, and then we still had Mike Vernon, Al McInnes, Gary Suter. All those guys were traded in the offseason, but Joe Nieuwendyk, he wanted a longer-term deal with the Calgary Flames, and Flames were only offering at the time in arbitration a one-year deal, and definitely he didn't want that, and he played hardball, and he actually sat out and was away from the team at the start of the 95-96 season. He wasn't there at training camp, and I'm going to say this trade happened on December 19th, 1995, where the Calgary Flames didn't have Joe Nieuwendyk. And we definitely missed him, because Calgary struggled at the start of that season because we traded away a lot of assets that because of rising salaries. And that's why I say this lockout was necessary, because we could have kept a lot of pieces of the team, where now we have salary caps everywhere where your teams can only spend so much, but that was not the case at this time here. And also, what also didn't help, I mean, it was even especially towards the end of the 1990s there, where the Canadian dollar was 62 cents US there, where it required $1.50 plus to get $1 American dollar there. And when you have 80% of your income, in Canadian dollars from ticket sales, concession, merchandise, whatever. But then most of your expenses, 80% of your expenses are in American dollars. That's where you definitely feel the pinch there, because the numbers that get thrown around where all American dollars there. But going back to the trade here, as Joe Nieuwendyk, it was clear that he was not going to come back to the Calgary Flames, and we weren't able to afford to keep him. And ultimately, if you look at my video where I revisited the time when we traded Theoren Fleury away, that was the same reason why we traded Theoren Fleury away, is we couldn't afford to keep him, and we made the assets we got in return that didn't pay us back. But in this case, this trade happened. So back in December 19th, 1995, that's kind of just my backstory on Joe Nieuwendyk, that his time with the Calgary Flames appeared to be over. However, we were able to swing a deal just before Christmas, as the trade freeze was in place there, because there's always a week window there where you don't make any trades during the holidays. But it was definitely a nice Christmas gift for both teams involved here, as the Calgary Flames were able to trade Joe Nieuwendyk to the Dallas Stars. And he definitely helped the Dallas Stars in terms of taking that next level. And he actually ultimately won another Stanley Cup with the Dallas Stars in 1999, the only year that they won the Stanley Cup. And Dallas was also at a time competing with Detroit and Colorado in their peaks there. And they definitely benefited with no salary cap to be able to keep their good players. And actually, Joe Nieuwendyk won the Conn Smythe Trophy with the Dallas Stars in 1999 as the playoff MVP, and also was instrumental in being one of the top players for the Dallas Stars as well when they got back to the Stanley Cup final the following year, but they ultimately lost to the New Jersey Devils in their second cup there. Calgary got return was for Corey Millen and this guy, Jarome Iginla. Before you say, well, hey, Jarome Iginla is always synonymous for being a Calgary Flame. Yes, for obvious reasons, Jarome Iginla will always be remembered as a Calgary Flame, and rightfully so. He has recently retired with the Calgary Flames as being the franchise all-time leading scorer there, but actually Jarome Iginla was originally a Dallas Star. As back in 1995 there, actually Edmonton hosted that draft, and Jarome Iginla is from St. Albert and definitely grew up in the Edmonton area there. The Dallas Stars actually drafted him in the first round, 11th overall there. If you really look back at the 1995 draft there, you had Brian Berard and was drafted first, and Wade Redden was drafted second overall there. I'm sure if you redid the draft, I think Jarome Iginla could be picked first overall. And also in that draft, guys like Jean-Sébastien Giguère was also drafted 2 picks later, with then the Hartford Whalers. And Mika Kiprusoff actually was drafted that year, 116th overall by the San Jose Sharks there. But getting back to the trade here, I mean, you could say, looking back in history here, Joe Nieuwendyk, you can probably say, is one of the best centermen that the Calgary Flames have ever had, and was definitely one of the best scoring centers. Although we did trade away an asset that, he was playing hardball about his business at the time. He was trying to obviously get as much money as you can. I mean, if you were in that position, you do the same thing. But I think if the salary cap was then, we probably would have been able to keep him. But I think we had a nice return for Joe Nieuwendyk, as you got Corey Millen, and actually he played 1.5 seasons with the Calgary Flames. He came into the lineup right away, and he was towards the end of his career, and I'm talking about Corey Millen, who was just he was just as tall as Theoren Fleury. He wasn't a tall player there, and he was good for like 10 goals and 30 points there, and he came into the lineup, provided some pop there. And then, I mean, the 1995-96 season there, the Calgary Flames did eventually make the playoffs. However, got swept by the Chicago Blackhawks, where eventually Jarome Iginla, after he played with the Kamloops Blazers, and he led them to 2 Memorial Cups there, after he got knocked out, he got signed and played Game 3 of that series against the Chicago Blackhawks, where he set up the 1 goal in Game 3. and he scored the only goal that Calgary eventually lost that game in triple overtime in Game 4 to get swept, which to date that's the longest game the Flames have played in terms of length, where Iginla scored. I'm going to say we did very well for the Joe Nieuwendyk trade, where we traded him to Dallas in exchange for Corey Millen and Jarome Iginla there, as he was a Dallas Star before he became a Calgary Flame. Or another way I'll say is that he wasn't a star for long to be a star big time. I mean, yeah, obviously Joe Nieuwendyk, he was listed as one of the 100 best players of all time there, and he definitely is still up there in the top 5 in goal scorers and points there for the Calgary Flames before Jarome Iginla and Darren Fleury eventually rewrote the record book there. But it was definitely a great trade. Dallas, they were building up. They were definitely had key players. Mike Badano also was on the team, and eventually Dallas got Ed Belfour and net there, and they were led by the mastermind and Ken Hitchcock there, and Joe Nieuwendyk. He led the Dallas Stars to their only Stanley Cup win. He won the Conn Smythe Trophy and led Dallas to the finals the following season there. Unfortunately, Joe Nieuwendyk, towards the end of his career, he definitely had some back injuries. He actually was fortunate enough to play on 3 Stanley Cup teams with 3 different teams, as he was a part of the 1989 team with Calgary. He led I think he had the biggest role in the Dallas Stars winning the Cup in 1999, including winning the Conn Smythe Trophy, and he was the part of the 2003 New Jersey Devils team, where he provided some time in the offense there as well towards the end of his career there. He also had some time with the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Florida Panthers there, where it was chronic back issues that ultimately forced him to retire. And I think there was a couple incidents where Joe Nieuwendyk almost came back to Calgary, because I think there were some rumors that maybe Calgary would have made a trade with Florida to get Joe Nieuwendyk here and have him, retire as a Calgary Flame. He eventually got honored as a Calgary Flame, and although I kind of think I debate maybe his number should actually be retired, but another time that I think Joe Nieuwendyk almost came back here is after when he was done playing in the NHL there. He actually was the general manager of the Dallas Stars for 4 seasons there, and actually most recently he was a scout with the Carolina Hurricanes as of last season there. But I think at the time when Brian Burke took over as the president of hockey operations there and looked at everything, and he ultimately decided to let Jay Feaster and John Weisbrot go, which at the time it was actually shocking, but now looking back, that probably was a great move, especially when you can look at Jay Feaster's last season as the Flames general manager there, where he had the Riley debacle and then didn't get enough for Jarome Iginla and Jay Bouwmeester. There was one rumor that I think Joe Nieuwendyk could have been the next general manager of the Calgary Flames at that time if he wanted that job, and I still think that would have been neat if we had Joe Nieuwendyk as general manager, one of the best centermen of all time, coming back to the franchise here. But I definitely feel as a fan, I don't feel any disrespect, or I didn't feel like he turned his back on the Flames. Maybe it was a little nasty negotiation there. It was definitely playing hardball, but when it helps that you traded away one of your best, centermen of all time for one of the best right wingers of all time to become the franchise leading all-time scorer and one heck of a guy. And I may dare say one of my man crushes, because if I could be half the person that Jarome Iginla is, I'd be a much better person, and we'll definitely be a much better place if we can be half the person that Jarome Iginla. And I just say, on the Calgary side of the trade, he was here for 16 plus seasons. There was a couple times where, because of the squeeze with the salaries rising before the salary cap, I felt like we barely was able to keep Jarome Iginla right up until 2004. And thankfully we did, because, the peak of Jarome Iginla, I'm going to say the 2 peak moments for Jarome Iginla as a Calgary Flame, where he definitely had his first breakout in the 2001-2 season where he was the Art Ross Trophy winner, and he won the Leslie Pearson Award by players that voted on him. I think that's the I'm not too sure if it's the Ted Lindsay or the Mark Messier Leadership Award. It's been renamed, but that's the award where the players vote for who you think is the best player in the league. And I think he got gypped on the Hart Trophy because he lost to Jose Theodore. There was a tie there, but I think it also didn't help that Calgary did not make the playoffs, and there was one writer that apparently didn't vote that could have swayed it the other way. And then obviously the 2004 run where he eventually got named the captain there, and led us to the Stanley Cup Finals in 2004, and debatably, should have won the Stanley Cup. Things played out differently there, and just all the franchise records he's had. That was a nice trade for Joe Nieuwendyk, and this is definitely one of the best trades the Calgary Flames made. It was Al Coates, who was the general manager at the time for the Calgary Flames, and it was Bob Gainey, who was the general manager of the Dallas Stars at the time, and both saw some. I mean, if you had a chance to get Joe Nieuwendyk still in his prime, you would jump at it in the NHL there, and Calgary was definitely high on Jarome Iginla as a return there, saying, well, if you want our centerman, we want Jarome. And actually at the time, the excitement for Jarome Iginla picked up right away as well. Calgary was still back in the WHL, and this was only the second year of the Calgary Hitmen. And actually Jarome Iginla at the time, he was going to the World Juniors, and I believe it was in Boston, so he was still in North America there. And then when he told them that he got traded to Calgary, he actually funnily thought he was getting traded to the Calgary Hitmen, and he was wondering at the time why the heck was he getting traded to the Calgary Hitmen when the Kamloops Blazers were still in amongst of their dynasty there. Then it was clarified that no, you're property of the Calgary Flames now, and in that tournament, Canada won the gold, and Jarome Iginla won the top forward there. And I remember in the papers there was still Jerome who, but he definitely introduced himself very well, very quickly. And it was definitely a great trade for the Calgary Flames to trade away Joe Nieuwendyk. And, I think most fans forgive Joe Nieuwendyk. His banner's up in the Saddledome, honored, but I think it should be retired. And I think another sign was fans forgive is when they retired Mike Vernon's jersey. I remember one of the synonymous things they did. They had members of the 1989 team there at the time, and they had Joe Nieuwendyk. He was hoisting the Stanley Cup, and the fans were all cheering for him, and that was shortly after when he retired. But, I definitely don't have any disdain in mind. It was a great trade, and what do you think? Is this a great trade here? It definitely was a great Christmas present for both teams here, as it got Dallas that piece that they needed to eventually led them to win the Stanley Cup. And when you're on a Stanley Cup winning team and you win the Conn Smythe, that means you were the playoff MVP here. Well, eventually we got, for sure, a future Hall of Famer, and you could probably debate and say Iginla got snubbed on the top 100 best players of all time list that Joe Nieuwendyk's on. But it was definitely a great trade that both teams won there. So what are your thoughts on this? And of course, if you like everything I do on my YouTube channel, just make sure you hit like, subscribe, and follow along. Hit that bell icon. Mostly talk Calgary sports here and recap all the Calgary teams. And it was definitely fun to look back on this trade, because the Taylor Hall trade definitely was in the news recently, and brought the trade freeze. And but that sense, this was a hockey deal that the Calgary Flames made. It looks like for the Taylor Hall trade, it was definitely maybe a rental. So, but at the same time, it was both situation with the Calgary Flames in 1995 and the New Jersey Devils now in 2019, as we approach 2020, believe it or not. We're just maximizing an asset that, in the case for Taylor Hall, now that there's a salary cap and you make almost the same amount of money elsewhere, Taylor Hall did not want to go to. Apparently, he didn't want to stay in New Jersey anymore, and that's why he wasn't in a hurry to sign an extension. Well, the case I think with Joe Nieuwendyk was, I don't think he wanted to leave Calgary, but he knew with the economic system at the time there, that he knew he was going to make more money elsewhere. However, with the 3 Stanley Cups that Joe Nieuwendyk won, he honestly remembers the one with Calgary the most there, which definitely, also, feels like we can forgive. And also, one of his childhood friends was Gary Roberts. And Gary Roberts was also on that team, so he got to share the Stanley Cup win with them. So, thanks for watching. Go Flames go, and I'll see you in the next video here.